Home is supposed to be your safe place, your comfort zone, the one space in the world where nothing can touch you. But what if that comfort is a lie? What if the silence you enjoy isn't silence at all, but someone listening, waiting for the right moment? It starts with something small. A light left on when you're sure you turned it off. Footsteps upstairs even though you live alone. You try to explain it away. You blame your memory, you blame the wind. But deep down, something feels wrong. You lock your doors, you check the windows. You sleep with the TV on just to feel less alone. But what if you're not alone? What if someone's already inside? Someone who doesn't want your money or your things, just you. Because once you realize you're not imagining it, once you know the fear is real, it's already too late. The walls you trusted won't save you. The locks you clicked won't hold them out. And the worst part? They never broke in because they were already here. I don't know why I let a strange man into my home last night. A man came into my house and I'm the one who let him in. But I don't know how this happened or why. I know I would never let a stranger, someone whom I've never seen or heard of before, to come into my home like that, especially at such a late hour. I am a sensible person just as much as everyone else, and yet I did let him in. There are some gaps in my memory, but I'll do my best to describe the events of last night. Maybe it'll help us get a better understanding of what happened, but something tells me it won't make a difference. I don't remember whether he knocked on the door or rang the doorbell, but then again, there's also the possibility that he didn't do any of those things. I only recall standing in front of the door with my hand already on the doorknob, yet not quite sure how I'd gotten there in the first place, or what even prompted me to get off the couch. I was just there, and all I can say is that somehow I knew there was someone on the other side of the door, and that they were waiting on the porch for me to let them in. I know I tried forming certain thoughts in my head, such as what am I doing, or what's going on, but they always seemed to fizzle before completion. Instead, my actions and speech seemed to be under some kind of outside influence. My hand wouldn't let go of the doorknob, eager to twist it and finally let the stranger inside. I wanted to ask who is it, but the only thing that I blurted out was a come in. The man on the other side of the door replied immediately as if on cue. "Well, I'm here to see your house." There was a strange air of familiarity to his voice, and yet at the same time there was a smothering, violently uncanny aspect to it. It sounded deep yet distant, friendly but intrusive. This immediately raised some red flags, but any and all concerns I'd have would disappear just as quickly as they'd come. I wanted to say I'd be calling the police if he didn't leave, but I literally couldn't utter any of those words. I couldn't even say a no. The more I tried to speak my mind, the more confused I'd become. The effort I was making was such that I could feel cold sweat forming all over my body. Of course were the words that came out of my mouth on their own. I can see him, I can visualize him in my mind, but as soon as I try picturing or describing any of his traits, I feel like something pushes me back. Something's preventing my own thoughts and memories of him from becoming fully formed, and that alone is simply too terrifying to comprehend. I remember opening the door. I remember thinking he is very tall. I didn't see his face immediately. What I saw was his chest. He was tall, very tall. He grabbed the top of my door frame and slightly ducked underneath it as he walked into my home, before slowly closing the door behind him and locking it shut. My door frame stands at about 7 feet. I know because I'm the one who assembled it. I'm 6'1". He was tall, more than I'm able to say. And his face. I know I saw it, whether willingly or not, but I can't quite tell what was wrong with it, despite knowing fully well that there were many alarming things about it. No hair, very distinctive eyes and mouth. His skin, both its tone and texture, were just maybe a mask? Was it something sewn into the skin? I can't be sure, but there was something inherently revolting and dangerous about his face. That much I'm sure of. It made me feel this terrible uneasiness in the pit of my stomach, which was nothing but yet another thing that I couldn't voice or express no matter how much I tried. He didn't have any kind of odor attached to him, but he exuded this absolutely impenetrable, unfathomable madness of incomprehensible dimensions. God, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. This all sounds so insane. I don't know how long we stood in the entryway of my home, almost in absolute darkness, if it weren't for the moonlight coming through the windows behind it. I know we stared at one another for a while, but I can no longer see his eyes. I remember only darkness, dripping, oily, smeared darkness around the corners of his eyes. "Show me where you eat," he asked. I found myself standing in the living room. The man had his back to me as he slowly ran his hand on the dining table, as if tracing an invisible line. I couldn't do anything but watch as I stood there, completely still as an unseen force prevented me from moving. "This will do," he said. "It suits you." I replied, words once again coming out of my mouth without me having a say. "Show me where you sleep," he asked. Fear instantly tightened its grip inside my chest. Not because I would be leading him shortly into my bedroom without being able to do a thing about it, but because my wife was sleeping on our bed. The mere thought of seeing this dark figure standing in our bedroom as she slept was simply too much to bear, but I was powerless. The next thing I recall is standing outside my bedroom. The door was wide open, and I could see the man inside as he slowly approached my wife's side of the bed while she slept under the blankets. He sat right next to her as the mattress creaked under his size and weight. My wife called out to me, and I could immediately tell she was terrified beyond words by the sound of her voice. I could tell that she too wasn't quite saying what she wanted to say. She wasn't moving or making any attempts to get out of bed even in the presence of this terrifying stranger. We were both equally helpless. The man, perhaps sensing the concern we felt for one another, said to her, "Do not be upset. I came to see your house." As he said those words, his face drew closer to hers. I wanted to stop him. Entering the bedroom was all I was trying to do, but I found my hands gripping the sides of the doorframe, preventing me from taking a single step inside. Dark thoughts flashed through my mind, but when I heard him mumble some words, I realized he was merely whispering something into her ear. I say merely because he could have done anything he wanted to her at that point if he wanted to. And yet the words he spoke to her were just as bad as anything else. She started sobbing slowly at first and then uncontrollably, as if an unspeakable thing had been done to her. Sobs turned into screams, and screams became piercing shrieks. It was heartbreaking, and in my helplessness, I found myself thinking how I could just meet God then and there if I had the chance. I didn't understand anything anymore. Who was this man? What did he want, and what could he have possibly said to my wife to elicit such a reaction from her? I just wanted all of it to end. And that's when he turned his head to me and said, "Show me the little ones now." I felt like my heart got caught up in my throat. I had forgotten about my kids until he mentioned them. He stood in between their beds as my wife's shrieks could still be heard coming from down the hall, but my little ones were somehow still asleep. The strange man stood tall before me, perfectly still. He would turn his head slightly to the right and then to the left as he observed each of my two daughters for what felt like a long amount of time. "Good things," he whispered before moving without a sound, and stopped as he left their room to look me in the eyes once more, as we both stood out in the hallway. "This is a good house." His words made me snap back to reality. We were back at the entryway, but this time around, I was the one with my back to the door, not him. He laid the back of his hand softly on my shoulder, and its weight felt infinite. "You will now pass ownership of this house to me." It's not so much what he said, but how he said it. There was a certain sense of complete and utter finality to that statement. I knew that if I gave him what he wanted, I wouldn't be forfeiting just my home, but a lot of other things as well. Maybe everything, and I mean everything. I had to do something, and I still do not know how exactly I managed. There was no word for my sorry mental state at the time, so I don't think it was a conscious effort, at least not entirely. That beats man. He was after something. He seemed to want my house, which appeared to be good enough for him for reasons that were beyond me, but I could only say what he wanted to hear. "This is a good house," I repeated. There was a brief pause. "Yes," he said. "You deserve the best house," I continued. His face inched closer to mine as he bent over slightly. "Yes, there are better houses," I said. He stopped abruptly, almost as if frozen in time for a few seconds. I remember his head producing a slight twitch, would have gone unnoticed if he wasn't so close to me. "Down the road," I said. As I look at the side, he straightened himself up, his eyes now fixated on a window behind me and what lay beyond. As he did, I found that it was getting easier for me to speak on my own terms, so I kept at it. Better houses, bigger families. His head slowly turned to face me once again, and I could tell he was trying to verify how factual my statements were. He walked past me and went over to the window, where he stood in silence. I realized then that my wife wasn't crying anymore. I heard him mumble something, but I couldn't quite make out what he was saying except for the word to skin things. He then took a few steps back before approaching the door. "I will go see more houses." He unlocked the door and opened it. I couldn't believe he was actually leaving. "You can sleep for now." As he said those words, I felt a crushing wave of exhaustion suddenly coming over me. I fell to the ground but barely registered anything as my body went numb. I saw his massive figure once again ducking under the doorframe as he stepped onto the porch. He said something else on his way out, but I wasn't able to make out what it was, nor did I care. I was just glad to see him gone. My wife startled me awake as I realized where I had fallen asleep and the memories of the previous night slowly came to me. I hoped that it had been nothing but a nightmare, coupled with a brief sleepwalking episode, even though nothing of the sort had ever happened to me in the past. It took me just one look at her face to know that it had been real, all of it. She didn't remember much seeing as she never left the bed, but she remembered enough. The tall man, the indescribable terror, the words that wouldn't come out and the body that wouldn't move. His face. Our little ones, on the other hand, were seemingly oblivious to everything that transpired, so we did our best to not freak them out too much. We made sure they weren't hurt, but there was just no way we could send them off to school after what happened. We made up a lie and said the school would be closed for the day, maybe the whole week. My wife and I sat down and we both tried to figure out what had happened, but we kept hitting the same mental barriers. We thought about calling the cops, but would we be taken seriously? We can barely describe the man, even though his image is forever burned in our minds. The more we try discussing it, the less sense it makes, but at least we agreed on something. We're leaving today, and he won't find us here if he ever comes back. He can take this house and claim it as his own. I don't care, but that's as much I'm willing to compromise. We will never go through this again, not if we can help it. Who knows what he'd do to us? Should we move out? Any suggestion would be appreciated.